I worked with Dr. Kula this year after the Columbia accident. I was looking for alternatives to providing acceleration and assured program completion for any kind of moon project that we set about doing. And I think I'll show you that in the next few minutes. First of all, the last man on the moon is here today, if you count the last one out of the limb. And we've had limited robotic exploration since 1972. We all know that. We've been talking about it all week. And there are so many plans that are available to us if we had the funding and the proper program management to pick through them. But anything that gets started always is risking cancellation. We can't seem to get rid of that. Also, our commitment to a human return to the moon seems sporadic, and we haven't had any results yet in 30 years. What prevents us from returning to the moon? Now, I also want to tell you that I'm not here on behalf of Lockheed Martin. These are my own opinions, but there's some things that I've seen. I'm sure you've all seen certain things. There are 5 inhibiting factors in general that I see in terms of government acquisitions. They're listed up here, but I will tell you that competing with other interests for funds, especially in this development arena, is probably not in our better interest generally. I know there's some dissenting opinions about that. Also, we in the military industrial complex, there seems to be an emphasis on providing jobs and employment. I believe that that detracts from product deliveries. I know that it's something we have to do in the current system in order to make sure that every state gets his piece of the pie. Also, when something goes slightly wrong on a contract or funding decreases and there's a lot of rework and reorganization, there tends to be lengthy extensions to contracts. You can see that a lot. I heard SBIRS Low this morning. SBIRS High is another example of a program where you've seen lengthy contract extensions. First product has not been delivered yet. Also, you can reach a point of no return in a program to where you may be getting excessive contract extensions and a lot of money being poured into a gaping hole, and yet you've reached the point where you must finish it at that point, and that's very painful for people. And of course, there's cancellation of a project after a substantial investment. I mentioned catastrophic events. I believe that Dr. Schmidt mentioned that in his comments to the Senate. Got it right here. It was the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. And during those comments, he also mentioned that we got to be able to respond better to catastrophic events in our programs. We don't have an integrated effort yet. I think that's what this entire conference was about, was to try to find means of integration. I know that Dr. Foying has been doing that in the working group. And we also tend to reinvent the wheel a lot. I won't go into the other factors. What I think is needed is a robust, sustained return to the moon. I don't think anybody will argue that. And you can do that by securing your funding, by having responsible program management, and assuring program completion. It's easier said than done, of course. What I decided to do was contact Dr. Kula over in Germany, and using his Moonbase 2015 model as a backdrop, I was going to try to find ways to place a funding engine on top of that and see what would happen. I might also point out, I believe Nancy Lindsay mentioned this the other day, that Dr. von Braun in 1952 in Collier's magazine published a series of reports which illustrate in vivid color the same vision that we're trying to produce today 50 years later. And so the Moonbase 2015, in my mind, is Dr. von Braun's Moonbase. If you think about the fact that Dr. Kula served as the director of future projects in Huntsville from 1955 to 1965, I think there's a lot of water there. I think we have a valid program here. This is an $80 to $100 billion program in total. It uses a lot of fairly standard features, and we just heard about different types of nuclear power apparatus, but this is, I believe, one of the more standard ones. Down in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see the funding profile. This is a 40-year program, and with the exception of potentially the Fleet Ballistic Missile Program in the United States, I'm not sure of any program which has gone longer than 40 years in space. The spike that you see on the left is the initial funding spike for the development process and the initial acquisition of hardware and placement on the moon. And then for the remaining 30 years, you have a nice maintenance mode operations phase of the program. What I am proposing for the execution of such a project is a new agency. And I believe that Dr. Schmidt did say 2 weeks ago that if we do have somebody organizing and bringing us back to the moon, it may very well not be NASA. As far as the United States is concerned, as far as the international effort, there may have to be a new organization to help manage that. This may not be that organization, but I want to present it to you and show you what we found out. This is a Lunar Projects Authority based very, very loosely on the Triborough Bridge Authority of Robert Moses in New York during the 20th century. It has two major wings, financial and program management, and it's all based on acquisition of revenue streams. And these are revenue streams, as you'll see, that seem to be pretty well grounded in business. You have a steady accrual of funds and investment of those funds to let your accruals build. Then you have contracts let for very discrete deliverables and integratable either at a future time or on the moon. The contracts are also offered for short duration. I want you to keep that in mind because it's paramount to making something like this work, I believe. So it's a nonprofit business entity. Candidate revenue streams that you might use for such a thing. I don't know if anybody's ever considered casinos as a funding method for the moon, but hey, it's money. And if you can get it and if you can apply it towards lunar projects, you might be able to sustain a nice, smooth revenue stream for years and years and years to come. I've noticed that nobody seemed to mention that this conference, so I feel particularly proud that I was the first. If you look at that list, this is a very cursory list. I will tell you this is an unfunded project. I came up with this on my own, so I expect peer review, and I would love to have pointed questions after this. That's why I'm kind of zooming through it. Farther downstream, after real estate acquisitions, you might go into certain other businesses which people are known to spend money on. Now, I ask you, we've heard return on investment several times today. When somebody goes out and buys potato chips, when they buy video games, when they buy SUVs, they respect a return on their investment, but not in terms of money. And I might suggest that that's a philosophical point we need to maintain in our fundraising efforts in the future. So the financial management wing is tasked with purchasing and creating revenue streams, maintaining those businesses as they're acquired, and then also maintaining and growing the blanket organization which holds us all together. Then you take your interest-bearing accounts, let them build over time, and when you're ready, and when you do have an applicable project, then you can take off a piece of that money and apply it to building an integratable project. The program management wing, to me, the philosophy here is you want to have modularity and granularity in all the projects you select. Currently, if you look at a lot of our space programs, they tend to go on for years and years, and that allows a lot of inefficiency to develop. I believe that if you can build your project into modular and discrete deliverables with a sufficient granularity to permit short-term contracts, you can have these pieces built on a year-to-year basis with a very slow trickle of funding. And if your funding is not sufficient to continue, you just don't build for the next year. And if a contractor does not deliver on time, within requirements and exactly what you need, he doesn't get next year's contract. The contract management wing is kind of a bridge between the financial management and the program management. And what we're saying here is that you have to be able to match the funds with the programs. And so that's an ongoing activity. As funds accrue and prospective projects come along and proposals are asked for, you'll see this kind of matching activity going on. Now what I have here, based upon Dr. Curler's moon base, I got his funding profile. It looks like that big mountain. It's kind of a turquoise color. And I've proposed several lines to show differences in seed money and prospective growth patterns. Especially in real estate, you can imagine a 12 to 15% yearly growth revenue is reasonable, and that is well documented. The fact is, what the lines that I show here incorporate the real assets that you have as well as the new revenue coming in. If we call this a nonprofit, and if we're able to get an entity that does not have to pay taxes, we get to keep most of that money. And of course there's maintenance and employment expenses as well. The top line I put there for reference only, but just to show you that with $1 billion initial capital as opposed to something like $10 million initial capital, a sustainable growth rate of 20% will get you that kind of line. And before you look at that far right side as being some kind of asymptotic approach, it's not. I basically squeezed out the last 30 years of the project into about 4 or 5 blocks. It makes it look like that. But even so, a small investment up front would not be able to pay for the moon base. It's only after you get towards the later years that you're able to contribute, and even with very large amounts of capital up front, I don't think you can approach the spending spike that you would need. So what would be the potential contribution of a Lunar Projects Authority? Well, you can start a program, and you can set up a project office. You can start defining requirements and doing functional decompositions and certain types of systems engineering functions which are necessary. Thank you, sir. And you can also do the rest of these tasks here, these operations support, which is at the end of the program. There are unbudgeted activities also. If you have to go through a fault investigation or a failure investigation, that's not budgeted. You can never put that in a proposal. And I'm saying that this might be a way that you can help bridge the gap there to continue on the program without worrying about horrible budget hits. I would speak about risk mitigation, but I'm going to kind of whiz through these. I want people to ask questions if you would. Potential drawbacks of this kind of thing is the fact that the funding level initially, especially for the first 20 years, is probably not enough to build major whole systems of lunar programs. But what we do need to understand also is that there has never been a privately managed moon program that has all those integrated parts like you saw in Moonbase 2015. That's a risk to people. Also, modularity and granularity. I don't believe that certain components can be broken down to constituent parts which are easily allocatable to a 12-year turnaround contract system. So in the acquisition world, LPA could be a new additional customer for aerospace projects to include building pieces and parts of a moon base. It's non-competing with existing funding engines, and it certainly is not meant to displace anybody. It's meant to augment. It's a stable, long-term funding engine, and you can do small projects or maybe portions of the larger whole to help bridge the gap and get it done. The bottom line is you want to be able to provide secure, reliable funding, enforce effective program management, and hopefully decouple from external influences such as catastrophes or political changes or even public sentiment loss. Now, I maintain that if you could enact such a body, that a Lunar Prospector class mission from beginning to end, if you can do that, then that's proof of concept, and then it's just a matter of scaling up the initial seed money to get it done again. And you can build as many of these LPAs as you want to. Here's a list of future work. I'll leave that up here for right now. But I will tell you that I did not come here just to introduce this concept. I came here looking for collaborators. I'd hoped to see more business people. I know that Jim Benson's probably, very predominant there, but I noticed that we have a lot of scientists, we have a lot of NASA administrators, we have a lot of engineers, and I would love to talk to you about fleshing these concepts out. Can't pay you, but I can certainly sit down and we can talk and maybe make something of it. If you need to contact Dr. Kula, I would suggest the easiest way is to do a Google search on his name. He's the second guy on the list. And you can also reach me at Lockheed through that email address there, and I would really love to get your input. And I'll take questions.
Thank you, Steve.
All right.
Is there a question for Steve?
Yes, sir.
Could this be more easily funded through X-Prize type competitions as opposed to?
Well, I don't think that I've defined anything here. I'm not trying to define the exact ways of funding. I would take donations. And in case we do have to get funding on terms of debt financing, that is possible, especially when you think about the fact that you will be purchasing, let's say, real estate properties, commercial and private properties, where you're going to have to get some debt financing to get that started. But that's pretty stable stuff. It's easy to do. People do it today.